Okay, so today I wanted to go over HTML, like we said we're going to do. So as we go back, this is going to be workshop 2, and then it's going to be lab 1, 2, and 3. So if we want a review of lab 1, so again, we kind of wrote up here that you're only supposed to be editing this file, which is index1.html. We have instructions for this lab, and we have some hints for you as well. So we know we talked about some grids before, and then this is how we wanted to lay it out, where you just write the class is equal to grid. So as we go down, notice how unlike workshop 1, this test case is already filled for you, just like before, but there's no solutions. So that really was supposed to tell you that you are just supposed to go to index1.html. And when you go here, you can see that the code here for lab 1 and refer to lab1.js for instructions and hints. So the other thing is that if you go to lab1.css, you're going to kind of notice that we wrote here to not edit any of the following below. So when you go over here, notice how this is already in a body tag for you, so you don't have to worry about it. And this is kind of the solution that we wanted. So first, have div plus is equal to grid container. And just like in the hint that we had over here, you have a div and you put all the elements in between it. So here's the opening part of the div and here's the closing part of the div. So inside this grid, if we look at the instructions, it's telling us that we need to make 3 things called a card. Use div class is equal to card. And we're supposed to make 3 of these. So 1, 2, 3. And then remember to just keep your formatting. So it's going to look something like this, right? Now, when we go over to lab1.js, we see the next thing, which is to have an H3 and a button in each card. So remember that H3 is referring to the style of text and how large it is. So when we go over here, have H3 and H3. Finally, H3. So remember that in HTML, we had to have the opening statement, so that's the one without the slash, and then the closing one is the one with the slash. So just call it something like card1, card2, and card3. Nice. So let's look back here. So we've created the grid container. We've put 3 card elements in this container, and then we have an H3 and a button in each card. Actually, we do not have the button yet, actually, so finally, we have the button. So button type is equal to button. Okay. Close the button, and let's call this button. So we're going to copy this over. Remember to keep your formatting. So it's going to look something like this. We're button 1, button 2, and button 3. So let's go back to the instructions. So we've created the grid container, and actually one thing you can do is when you go down to the solution, you're going to see here that it's the doc.query selector grid container. So this is going to let you know specifically that the tag we wanted was called grid container. So I know I said that you could just use grid up here, but when you're looking down here, that's how you can figure out that we specifically want the tag to be grid container, card, and then button. So if we try to run this, again, remember that in order to run this, you use node server.js. And let me open it here. So go to workshop 2, you see lab 1, and then this is what the live preview is meant to do. So you can see here how we have a website. You're going to see it for lab 2 here and lab 3 here as well. And with this website, you're just going to be able to code in however everything you want to do for it. And in this case, you can see how this is the card element, then there's card 1, and button 1, there's card 2 and button 2, then there's card 3 and button 3. So we should be able to run this and all tests have passed. However, let's see what happens if we were to break this. So if I wanted to, let's say, remove a button, when you go over to your website, just remember to click refresh on it, and you see how the button's missing. You run the test cases, this thing fails. So this lets you know that cards must contain an H3 and a button. Okay, so let's add that back. And this is how you're meant to do the first one. So if you notice how these cards are like rounded off and everything, you're going to see something all the way at the top called link rel style sheet href lab1.css. So that's what I was referring to in this file over here, where you don't have to edit any of the below, because if you notice here with the .grid container, it has a display of a grid, and then it tells you all the information about it, such as the columns, the gap, and the margin. And the same goes with the card here. So the background color, the border radius, the padding, and the block shadow. But if I was to remove this line right here, and then I was supposed to refresh it, see, notice here how this still passes, but if you look at the live preview, all of your code looks very different from before. So even though this is considered in a container called a card, you don't see all of the the padding and all the design made for it. Even though just have a card with a button, that works for all three. So that is kind of why we want to give you this. It helps to visualize it, but it's also supposed to show you how to implement CSS. So anytime that you want to implement a CSS file into here, you normally just have this link. So normally the recommendation is that you always have to have this line. You should always have this line, and then this third line can also stay up here at the top before you make any other changes to your HTML file. Okay, so next I want to go over lab 2. And so let's look at here. So again, don't need to edit this file. What are we editing? lab2.css. What are we doing? Removing the top left box, where to 46 pixels to the left, resizing the top right to 40 pixels tall. Change the bottom left color to 001. This is an RGB. 4 is to rotate the bottom right to 90 degrees. And you can see we're just supposed to add the changes under each object. And here's some hints here. So the main hint is that each of these changes are just one lines that you have to change. And you are not supposed to change currently existing code, just supposed to be adding code on top. So for part 1 and 2, we give you a hint that you could look at examples from the other targets. So that lets you know that these two changes are something that we've already done to another target. For part 3, we give you the function that you need, which is background, then the RGB parameters. And for part 4, we just want to use transform, rotation, and number of digits. So let's look at the lab2.css file. So it's over here. And then this is where we're supposed to be adding the file here. But before we edit this file, I want to show you guys the lab2 static.js. So these are all of the other CSS things that we've made in order to create this current design here, right? And then if I go to the index2.html, you can see here how we have both style sheets. So you can kind of see here how you don't actually need to only have one CSS file attached. You can actually add multiple. And you can look at all of these here. So they have a target, right, with the ID tag. So this is how, and if you notice the difference between this class and the ID tag, it is when you go to the CSS file, you can see here how there's a hashtag here, right? And if I was to hover, it says element, which is, and then you put the ID with the target, right? So if you see this hashtag, that normally means that you're going to be using ID. Whereas if I was to be using the dot here, right? So back then, if you remember, it was hashtag, something like that, right? The dot uses class. So this is the difference between the two. In general, they don't make too much of a difference, right? whether you use hashtag or dot. The only thing that really changes is whether it's ID or class. So let's go over to our lab2.css file. So when we're supposed to be adding code here, so if you remember the first one, so use left 46px, right? And the second one is to make it 40 pixels tall, I believe. 40 pixels tall. So if you look down here to some of these other ones, you're going to see height. So height. Then comes the bottom left one, where we're supposed to be changing the color to 001. And you can see here how you're meant to use background RGB in the parameters. So background RGB of 0, 0, 1. And if you're wondering here why we had you guys use 001, even though you can go all the way down to 000, that's just because we kind of didn't want you guys to copy these ones back here, up here already, which is 000. Kind of wanted to show you guys how to edit it yourself. And the other reason why is instead of using RGB, you could just use the background black. And this actually would have given you RGB of 000. So we specifically want you guys to use RGB so that you can color things yourself. And then again, you can also just use, click on this color if you guys have the extension, and you could just like run it around to find your color that you want. So again, let's set it back to 001. And finally, we have the target bottom right, which when you look at the JS file, it is to be rotating the bottom right 90 degrees. And we give you the hint to use transform, rotation, 100 degrees. So for this, you can use transform, rotation, 90 degrees. So let me save this and go here. The transform looks like it didn't work properly. Target bottom right. Let's see. If we were to try to run this though, yeah. See, we can see here that this one was not being rotated 90 degrees. Let's see. I know one thing that you could always do is you could always just try closing and reopening it, see if that changes anything. However, I think it would be an error in something. Yes, you can see here how it's still not rotated. Does mean that there's something wrong here. And again, we can always just try looking at the answers, right? We did provide you guys all the answers, and I think it's actually the same, so I'm not exactly sure why it's giving errors. Right, yeah, it is the same. We did oh, okay, it does work now, so guess, so you see how before it was transform rotation, now it's transform rotate, so it's small things like that, so you do have to remember that it's very syntax specific. So when you have this, you can run it and it passes. And I'm not sure if you guys would understand this, but there was some meaning behind why we made this. If you don't know it, you don't know it, but okay, moving on to lab 3. So we look at what we're supposed to edit here, which is index3.html. And then what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to add a button, and then in the button, we're supposed to add a reference to a specific link. And the link was supposed to be down here. So let me just, so we add a reference to this link over here, and the expected is that the button will either pop up in the link in any tab or use the menu player. So here's some hints as well. If you remember, when we use target is equal to in quotes blank, that is how we make it pop up to a new file. So let's get it started. Go to index3.html here. So we also give you guys some hints on what averagely you can do. So you can see here, to remember to add a link, use a href link, then close it with an A. And then you can have a button, which can access the link here. So as you can see, you have a button, button, A. So when we have it here, we have A and button, right? Then remember, A has an href to this link, and the button, just say click me. And it's actually all that lab 3 should have had to it, where it would run, and you can click this, but you teach refusing to connect. And that's normally when you use the equals to targets is equal to blank. And I won't let it fully run, but you got to see what it was. So mostly that was everything to do with the labs, as they're really, we want to leave them a bit simple. You can see here it said less than 5 lines added, but we didn't really want to tell you guys that you could just do it in 1 line, right? So that was about it for these workshop labs. They were pretty simple, and we're thinking about making a few more, especially dedicated to CSS, because we know that we are fully taught you guys that with a lecture slides yet. So just like before, we also have a SpotErrors here, and this one specifically is for SpotErrors.html. I'll leave this posted, and then so when we look here, there's 3 errors in this page, and I think I'll have Jaden explain the 3 errors in them.
Okay. For our first error, it's in this line. If you guys can notice, it's missing a slash error, so it isn't ending properly. Oh, it's not. So that was the first error, which was the syntax error. And then for our second error, if you're linking a image, you actually don't use href. You do use source. You use source. Yes.
Let me write out source. I think.
Source. So the source will be taking this image from a folder. Usually you want to make it a folder and link the path to it. Like, let's say you create like a folder called assets. If you make the assets folder, you will need to go back and actually go into the folder itself. I didn't make the file. And for our third error, it is this line where it is not actually a list element. So instead of A, you would need to change it to Y.
So I think he wasn't able to fix it properly, but you see here that it's kind of like not in the A as well. And then in here you would still have like the contact page or contact or something. So again, if you kind of like see what went wrong there, you can kind of see right here how there's this ending part right here, but then this contact also has an ending part. So if you remember here, the thing with how these look is that it always looks for the first closing bracket. And since it already saw this closing bracket, it will no longer try to look for this one over here. And that means that this one is freely able to be put in a part of text. And here's the only thing though, is that if I want to add both of them to the text, it would not work. So just remember to remove this one and then add your space in between. Okay. And then again, there were some answers here for the Spot HTML. I guess he also just removed it, so not too sure about that. But
You know that.
then the other thing here is that we also created some logic puzzles for you guys. So the first one here is for containers.txt, and well, it doesn't look like it was in HTML because this is actually in JavaScript. So the thing here is that you have here, which is your div, and I created this for you already, right? So in HTML, you have a div with the ID box and the class card active. So if you remember the difference between the ID and the class, that is in CSS, you define that through your hashtag and your dot. So remember that ID goes to hashtag and class goes to dot. So over here, you have let box. So this is in JavaScript, right? Should probably make that now. Let the box equal to document.getElement by ID box. So if we kind of break this down, you're getting the element which has an ID of box. So if you look up here, this HTML line has a div with an ID of box. So it's taking this one right here. Then if the box.classlist contains active, right? So you're looking for the box to be active over here, right? Then you would log that the box is active. If not, you would log that the box is inactive. So this is kind of like the start of how you're supposed to be connecting JavaScript to HTML. We know we keep telling you guys about how JavaScript is for running all of like the functions and all of like the background things, whereas HTML is for anything that the user sees. And this is like the first example of it, where again, if you remember, console.log only outputs to your terminal. So it's kind of like stuff like that where you're going to slowly see how you connect the two. So that was the easy one. We just kind of wanted you guys to understand like slowly how to work with it. Then comes the medium one here. So you have a div with a class container. Then you have a div with a class container and active container. Then you have a div with a class container. So first of all, you have let containers equal to get elements by class name container. So again, if we remember, this is class name, so you're looking for the class. Whereas before here, you're using ID, so we're looking for the ID. So we're looking for anything with container. So there's 1, 2, 3 things with container. And the way that this works is it'll actually put them into a list. So let's say we call this like 1, 2, and 3, right? Inside containers, it's going to look like something like containers has like something with 1, 2, and 3 all in it. And obviously this isn't exactly how it sees it, but this is kind of like how you can understand it. So if you remember how an array works, the length is just how many elements are in it. So if containers.length is equal to 3, console.log correct count. And as you can see here, there are 3 elements in here, so this should be the correct count. Then if containers 1.classlist contains active container, the second container is active. So if you remember how we use a list, again, this is the 0th element, this is the first element, and then this is the second element, because we always count from 0. So containers of 1 is actually this element over here. And we look at the class list, and does it contain active container? You can see here, it does contain active container. Therefore, it'll print that the second container is active. And remember, with an if-else, if the if is already true, then you will not go to the else. So this part here will not run. Then finally, we have a bit of a hard one. So I don't expect you guys to fully understand this just yet, but we want to expose it to you already. So you first of all have a div with an ID of parent, which is the class of wrapper. Then inside this container, you have a container with the class of child inner, and those are the two things, and there's nothing inside of that one. But you can see here, so whenever we call the outer thing, we would call it the parent, and the inner thing would always be a child. So I know you guys have heard us do that with these folders as well. So kind of as a small explanation, so when you see these, they're all in line here. These are all sister folders. And then these are all under the same parent, which is class demos. So you can see, if we were to refer it from class demo side, you would say that class demos has these 4 children, or each one would be considered a child of these folders: LogicPuzzles, sliding website, example, SpotErrors, and styling, stuff like that. And LogicPuzzles therefore has a child of containers, right? So class demos would have a child of LogicPuzzles, and LogicPuzzles has a child of containers. So the same thing works here with containers, where anything that's inside it, we would generally call it a child. So let's let the parent div, so the parent one, equal to a document.getElement by ID parent. So we see this one over here has the ID of parent. Then let the first child equal to the parent div, so parent div dot first element child. And you can see here that the first element child of it, or the first child of it, is right here, this child inner. So we look down here. So if the parent div, this parent div, dot children dot length is greater than 1. So how many children does this one have? It only has this one. So is 1 greater than 1? That is false, right? 1 greater than 1. And then if you remember here, we explained it in if.txt. So when you see these two lines together, this means or. So you need the first or the second part to be true for it to be accepted. So when we come back here, we have this or statement. So we know that the first one is false, or, and let's look at the second one. Parent div dot has child nodes. So this is actually also going to be false. It's a bit hard to explain why, but just understand that this should also be false. And then the second one is if the first child dot matches div inner, and so remember this is and, so you need both to be true. Not that the first child has a parent ID strictly equal to main, we log condition beta. So this here I believe is also meant to be false, and then you would print condition gamma. So again, we know this one's a little bit difficult, but you just have to kind of like, well, I can kind of explain this part here. So this part is actually true because it is in inner div, but the second part here, if I was to remove this equal sign, you would get condition beta. So the reason why is that the first child dot parent element dot ID. So you go to first child, and then you go to this parent element. So you're kind of like wondering why even though it's main, I'm saying it's true. And the reason why is that this parent over here does not currently have an extra parent to it. So it is considered the main one. But again, because of this not over here, it turns into false. So instead of condition beta, this whole is statement would be false, and therefore you go to this else where you print condition gamma. So again, we know this one's a little bit confusing. If you guys see this, you can ask us more questions in class about it. Then finally, we have CSS.txt here. So we kind of just wanted to explain what the following does here. So first, again, I probably could have explained these with like hashtags or something, but if not, we should explain to you the difference between hashtag, dot, and a blank. So with hashtag, remember, you're looking for a class. For dot, you're looking for an ID. And if it's blank, you're actually just going to change anything that was created with it. So remember how we're always using button, type button or something like that. But if you have button, close button, that is what this is changing. So anytime that you just create a button itself, it is being changed through this. So what the CSS file is doing is it changes any button's background to light blue, and it changes the border to be 12, solid, and black. But again, if we were to add like a hashtag or a dot, you would respectively need class is equal to button or ID is equal to button. So that's the difference between these three. So remember that this one uses the class is equal to the type, right? This one uses the ID is equal to the type. And then this one just uses the type that's already right there, if it's blank. So we can then go for the H1. So if we notice here that the H1 does not have a dot or a hashtag, it is blank. Therefore, you're going to change the type, right? That's over here. So this will change anything that is in H1. And what would it do? So if you remember, H1 itself is text. That goes into it because you would write something like text here. And then you'd have the closing H1. And again, H1 is like the sizing of the text. So what we would do is we would change the color of it to red. Then we would change the font size to 24 and align it to center. So even though it's an H1, we can still specifically declare what we want its font size to be. And then we can even do like left align, right align, center align, stuff like that. Then comes the third one here, which is dot box. So remember, when you see dot, dot means that you're using ID. Believe, just to make sure I'm not wrong this whole time. Oh no, sorry. It's actually the complete opposite. I'm sorry. So if you see the dot, that means you're using class. If you see the hashtag, that means using type. See here, so we use the ID, target top left, and you connect that to a hashtag. So ID is connected to hashtags, and dot is connected to classes. Yep, see, dot is connected to the class, and hashtag is connected to ID. Oh, sorry about that error. Okay. There you go. So this is the fixed one. Just remember, so it will always be like this. Again, I'll push this out to you guys later so you can see it, but again, just remember it is specifically this way, Hashtag is the ID, dot is the class. So we're actually meant to fix all of these this whole time. So if you see dot, dot is for class. So this is for something that looks for, let's just say it isn't an A, right? Class is equal to box, something like that. Then what does it do? It changes the width, the height, the padding, and the margin. So remember that the width is how wide it is, the height is how tall it will be, then there's the padding and the margin of it as well. So the padding is the spacing in between it, and the margin is the spacing for that as well. Then you also, the next one is for changing A. So again, no dot, no hashtag, so this is for anything that you create with the tag A here. And what does it do? It changes its color to green and its text decoration to none. And then finally, this is a hover here. So when we kind of look at these examples, you see how when you kind of like hover over a button, it turns darker. That is exactly what this hover tag over here does. So when you hover over it, it'll turn blue, and its text decoration will be an underline instead. So it's could be something like, imagine if you hover over this, it would then turn to green or something, right? Or in this case, it started as green and it turned blue. So this is exactly what it would look like after you hovered over it. So again, that's mostly what we want to cover for HTML. And then the final thing here is that we also have a basics.html here. So in here we kind of wrote all of like everything that you're going to need to look at. So you have how to make a list, how to add buttons with a type of button, how to add headers in H1s, how to even look at the difference between H1, H2, H3s, and so, and then how to have containers. And again, when you're in here, for some of you guys, you can just click run without debugging, and it should show up here with all of this stuff here. And then finally, we also want to show you guys the sliding website example. You want to explain it?
In the website example, first, here are the tags. Like most of these tags are just copy and pasted, but they are necessary for creating the format for it. So like this is for linking the CSS. This is just the title, and then these are just necessary because this is just like default the format is the UTF.
It lets you add special characters.
Oh yeah, special characters and emojis, right? And then for this, I have a asset folder where it just contains all the images that I uploaded. So there's a container here that includes a image track, and an image track is just like a list of images. And I just link all of the images, saying one attribute which is draggable, equal false. And then this here is also just to link your JavaScript to your okay. And for the container, we have an ID called image track, which we'll be accessing in the CSS and JavaScript. And then here we have data mouse down, and this is just for calculating the location you're at in the image track. And we'll be showing that later. Moving on to the CSS. Here we have, as you can see, the body and the before. And this is just two different things where it's just this is the background color and this is a gradient I created. They both have no hashtag or period because this is just accessing the entire background. Okay, here we'll see how the before works. So essentially, this is an overlay over the black background. So even though you have the black background, this will be over it.
And right now he's also just showing you guys how you're meant to be running it. So again, I know I'm doing in Visual Studio Code's terminal. However, just note that it is the same as when you open up your own terminal through PowerShell.
The live demo extension. You don't have the extension. Right. As you can see, the black background is being overlaid by the gradient, and the gradient will always remain on top. Okay. I can also go over the other things here. So the gradient is created with a radial gradient, and then there's also other gradients you can do, like linear gradient. As you can see, there's also different types of gradient you can do, but I chose radial gradient. And then some of the settings are here, where it's a circle at the center, and this is the center of the gradient. This is the outlining of it. So there's different levels of outlining, where it goes from inner to outer. And you can mess around with it to see how you would like to customize it. And for the inner, I made it more bright compared to the outside of it. Here we have the image track. And remember, this is a hashtag, so it's editing the ID, or it should be editing the ID. Yes, it's editing the ID of it. So it is accessing this, where it grabs the images from the assets folder, and then it styles them into all of these different parameters, where it has like the gaps, the positions, the dimensions. As you can see, this is for the actual images itself, where if it's larger than what the card is, you can actually see that it transfers over. So if you're all the way to the left of an image and the card is showing to the right, you only show the right portion. Where if you move it all the way to the left, you can see it moves with it. And for the JavaScript, we didn't really teach this yet, but it's the event listeners. So how event listener works is whenever the user puts in an input, the event listener would take that input and use it to do something. For example, if your mouse is held down onto the website, it creates this variable E, where E is the event. And we use this event a couple of times down here, where it just handles when you're touching down on the website and not, or lifting it up. And we have two different ones because they are on desktop and mobile. So how it actually works is it calculates the percent you are within the track using percentage and your mouse location. So as you move your mouse, it actually determines how far you are and uses that percentage for each card on the image too. This is just for a smooth animation. As you can see the sliding animation as I move it. And you can set the percent to whatever, but I'd set it as 50%. And this is just to adjust the internal positioning, which creates the illusion. And again, the illusion is this how the image is like moving. And these are just the event listeners I use. And you don't need all of it, but these are for desktop, and the other half is for mobile touch. And the website should be already in class demos. So if you guys want to run it, you would just go to run and use flat debugging. And I don't think it works with terminal because you don't have an extension for it. So it's okay.
So again, just remember you go to class demos, then when you close everything here, it's the sliding website example. Then you just go to index.html, run, and run without debugging. So in my case, you could see it's already running, and you just click debug anyways. And it's gonna pop up a second one, but it'll just be here. So again, some things that I want to cover that he did not cover. So specifically this title here. If you're wondering where it shows up, this title is the one up here. So just remember that if you ever want to write a title to your web page, you're just going to use this title over here. And again, that should be normally in the head over here. So, we're talking about the head versus the body. And as you can see here, the body is really used for anything that's, inside the website itself. Whereas the title is normally meant for any of your linking to your style sheets and the title itself. And then the other thing here is that this is how you're meant to add the code. You use this script down here. So again, we didn't really teach you too much about that, but just remember that whenever you're linking the two, because you notice out here it's in an HTML file, and then you want to use the code from the JS file, you just add script, source, and then whatever the file it is. So again, just remember that if you had it in a different file, you could also just write like, you just link the path to wherever it goes. Then the other thing with the CSS file, as we've gone over, so you have your body, and then this before is just anything that goes over. So I know he was talking about it. You're able to just like change the colors and stuff, and when you save it and reload this, you could see the changes reflected. So that's kind of the nice thing. I think most of you guys should already have the JavaScript extension for this. It comes as default, where you should just be able to have this color slider already for you guys. And again, this image track versus this image track with the arrow to image. So just know that this bottom one is specifically looking for any of the images that's within the main container. So as you can see here, you have this container that inside of it contains a bunch of images, right? So the div, then here's the closing of the div, and within it is just a bunch of images. So just remember that means when you go to here, that this is all of the dot images that is inside of the main class image track here, or the main ID. So I think that's most of everything we want to cover. And as you can see here, here's just all the images, and you can kind of see how they're not properly sized right now either, right? So even though they have multiple different sizes, when you go over here, you can kind of see how we've cut them. You can cut them down to make sure that they fit however you need. So that's mostly what we wanted to explain for this. And since this demo we didn't really make it ourselves, you can also look here to this link, and this provides a much more detailed idea of someone who's done this before. And you can kind of look at the source code over here. I guess it was taken down, but yeah, mostly around here, this is kind of like where we took the inspiration for this and how we want to show it to you guys. So again, one thing that we want to note is that while it does look really difficult, like a really complex website, you can see here how the index.html is only 25 lines, right? And if you think about that, most of these are like spaces, notes, comments up here, and like everything. And mostly is in your JavaScript file. But even this, it's all done in like 40 lines. So I kind of want to show you guys that it's like, it's not really that difficult in order to get like stuff styled properly, right? If you think about 34 lines, 41 lines, and 25 lines here, it's not really like a lot of code, but see how it's like it's a lot of like complex things here, and we're not really like limiting you guys, so you guys are free to like look things up if you want something specific. I mean, you know, stuff like your AI programs can help you with this as well. So let's see if I can verify that I'm human. And let's see what it states us. Okay, yeah, I don't think it's working, but just note that this is really where we got the inspiration for this from. Okay, so I think that's about it. So just to recap, we talked about the labs, going over all 3 of them. Then there's the LogicPuzzles for you guys. There's the sliding website example, and then there's some SpotErrors if you need them. And there's also this basics.html that just has like a small guide on like most of the things that you'll need. Okay, thank you.